In this video, I'll review more of the story arcs in the Apocalypse Triptych, John Joseph Adams's anthology series about the end of the world. In case you haven't seen the first couple videos in this series, the Apocalypse Triptych is a 3-book anthology series with stories about the end of the world. Book 1, The End Is Nigh, is about life leading up to the apocalypse. Book 2, The End Is Now, covers events immediately around the apocalypse. And the final book, The End Has Come, is about life after the apocalypse. Many authors wrote complete story arcs that go across all 3 books, and I'll cover 3 of those in this video. The first story arc is by Ben H. Winters and starts with a story called Bring Her to Me. The premise behind this one is a little tough to determine at first, but after a couple pages you realize that a voice that everyone believes is God is speaking to them. Everyone except a girl called P who doesn't hear the voice. This voice is telling everyone to do something that will completely change the world. The story pulls the reader along with a little bit of mystery. Is the voice really God? Why does it want them to do what it's telling them to do? There's a sense of dread in this one because you quickly realize what they're going to do. The big theme I see in this one is the danger of unquestioning religious obedience. Of course, if God is speaking in everyone's head, how easy is it to deny that it is God? The story was decent enough and had a low-key feel to it, aside from the dread that I just mentioned. I'd rate this one a 5 out of 10. The next story in the arc is called Bring Them Down. It switches the focus to Robert, who is still hearing the voice of God, and the rest of the community has followed God's commands, and Robert and P, who can't hear God's commands, are wandering the city. Bodies litter the apartment buildings, and P decides that they need to dispose of the bodies. Through this action that they take, the reader learns that this is an isolated city with a really hostile environment just outside of its gates. There's some info on the city's history, which makes it clear that the city is not on Earth. Robert is dealing with his need to obey God's voice and his desire to ignore it. Again, the theme of religious obedience is in play here. The ending is a bit sudden, but it makes sense in the story's context, and I'd rate this one a 5 out of 10. The final story in this is called Heaven Come Down. This one starts immediately after the last story. P is on her own now, but she can finally hear the voice of God. She starts to follow its commands and learns that she has some serious power. Once she gets bored with using it, though, she figures out what really happened with her people. It's kind of unclear how she does this, other than just like maybe some critical thinking. I don't know if there were ever really that many clues to it throughout the rest of the story to kind of bring you into it. The story did provide an explanation for all the things that just happened in the first 2 stories. The info that was dropped occasionally in the other 2 stories is put together to give a complete picture. As an ending to the 3-story arc, I'd say it did its job. I wasn't sure it made the arc any better, though. The reader does find out why P was chosen by the voice of God, and I don't know, I wasn't all that impressed. I'd rate this one a 5 out of 10. I'll call this the God's Voice story arc. Overall, it was just okay. Not that much happened in it, but there was enough drama to keep the reader interested. Each story was under 12 pages, which was a good length here because if they'd been any longer for the payoff that happened, I would probably be rating them much lower than I did. As it is, overall, I'm rating this a 5 out of 10. It's honestly mostly average and really didn't blow me away. The next story arc is by Hugh Howey, and it's related to his famous Silo series. If you haven't read that and don't want the possibility of spoilers, skip these reviews. In the Air is the first story, and it starts off with a guy named John. He's a special operative for the US government, and he knows something's about to kill everyone on Earth. Everyone except a select few that are secure in a bunker somewhere. His family has been immunized, but unfortunately for him, he's waited a little too long to get out of town. Now they're on the road with the rest of the drivers around them who, along with everyone else in the world, are about to die. The story is told half in current time and half in flashback. Both sides of it are done well and build the tension for the event that'll kill everyone. John is conflicted because the same leaders that decided to kill everyone offered him and his family a place in the bunker. He kind of has a double dose of guilt going on here because the flashbacks tell about an affair that he had with a coworker named Tracy the previous year when he was in Italy. He also feels some guilt that he didn't try to stop the looming apocalypse as well. I liked the story a lot, and Hugh Howey's writing is clear and easy to understand. In 16 pages, he made his characters and their emotions real. The apocalyptic cause in this one was kind of a technological spin on another common apocalypse scenario, and I'd rate this one a 9 out of 10. The next story in this arc is called In the Mountains, and this one focuses on Tracy, the woman from John's affair in the first story. She had invited John to join her group at the bunker they are using to wait out the apocalypse. John is the reason that she even knows about the plan to kill everyone. She also knows that the scumbags that came up with the plan are going to a bunker of their own, and she plans to get revenge on them once the apocalypse has run its course. There's some interpersonal conflict in this one. Many of the people in Tracy's group were duped into believing that they were just going on a small vacation, not getting locked away in a bunker for a long period of time. Then bad news arrives when a scientist in Tracy's leadership group discovers something they hadn't counted on, and it forces some tough decisions. The moral compass of the characters is tested in this story. Once the bunker group leaders discover their miscalculations, what are they willing to do to survive is the real question. Is the revenge they seek worth the price that they're considering? The story has some really good moments in it, and the tension is pretty tight throughout. I'd rate this one an 8 out of 10. In the Woods is the last story in this arc. April is Tracy's sister from the second story. She was in the bunker with Tracy, but now she's waking up in a metal container next to her husband, Remy. Once they get out of the container, they find a note from Tracy and realize how long they've actually been in there. And when an attendant arrives, they have to deal with it before leaving the bunker. I didn't think this story was as tight as the first two in the arc, but it's still really good. April and Remy are bewildered by what has happened to them. The story is interesting because it's unclear if they accept everything in Tracy's note until the very end. Will they do what she asked them to do, or was Tracy's plan for revenge doomed to fail from the beginning? The story has an appropriate ending to the story arc, though I didn't really like it all that much. I'd rate it a 7 out of 10. I'll call this the Silo arc since it's part of that universe according to the Silo series Wikipedia page. Based on the description of the first book, Wool, I think the secret in that book is given away in this story arc. As I said, if you want to read that series, read it first and then read these 3 short stories as a dessert. I will say these stories have bumped Wool up on my TBR pile, and I'd rate this story arc an 8 out of 10 overall. The final story arc is by Annie Bellett, who is an author that I'm completely unfamiliar with. It starts with a story called Goodnight Moon, and it's about a group of workers on a moon base that discover a rogue planet is going to hit the moon and destroy it before they can leave. There is an emergency shuttle, but it will only hold 3 of the 7 people there. Not a lot happens in this story. It's a more personal story about the main character, Netta Goodwin, facing the things that she regrets in life, the things that she'll never experience again, and then making peace with the fact that death is on its way. There was a significant bit of navel gazing in this. However, despite my not usually liking massive navel gazing, I did like this story. It wasn't so long that the introspection weighed it down, and the other character interactions were interesting enough to make it worth reading. And I'd rate this one a 6 out of 10. The second story in this arc is called Goodnight Stars, and this one stars Netta Goodwin's daughter, Lucy. She's on a camping trip near the California coast when the rogue planet hits the moon, and the night sky was amazing with meteors the night before. However, when Lucy and her friends find out why the sky was so amazing, they realize they need to get away from the coast, and they start away from the coast and plan to go to Lucy's parents' house in Montana. She knows her mom's dead, and she deals with some guilt over their relationship while she's on the road, which kind of matches up with Netta Goodwin's thoughts in the first story. This story is all about the journey and some events that happen along the way. It has some interesting moments that show how dangerous the end of the world could be, either from nature or from man or from the disruption of everything that we take for granted in our modern world. This story still has some introverted moments as Lucy considers her relationship with her boyfriend and her parents, especially her mom, who she knows is dead at this point, but she still doesn't want to think about that. It's an entertaining story with just enough character depth to get it a 7 out of 10 for me. The final story in this arc is called Goodnight Earth, and it starts off many decades after the first two stories in this arc. The moon's fragments have formed something called the Ring, and debris occasionally rains down on the planet. The focus here is on a woman named Karen who is special in a deadly way and is working on a riverboat with the man that saved her as a child. She starts thinking about her past during the story because of a family that comes aboard, and she's certain that the small children with that family are kind of like her. Like the previous story, this one has some action in it to show the desperate times around them. Karen is resistant to using violence, but sometimes push comes to shove and there's nothing anyone can do about it. This story would easily stand on its own, and the main character is interesting enough that a much longer backstory could be developed based on the info that is put out there about her background in this story. I'd rate this one a 6 out of 10 and say that I wouldn't mind more stories in this post-apocalyptic Earth setting. I'll call this last set of stories the Shattered Moon arc. Overall, I thought it started slow with the first story, but the second story made up for that with some good action, and the third story also added a lightly sketched future history that sounded interesting. Overall, I'd rate this story arc a 7 out of 10. So that's it for the third group of story arcs in the Apocalypse Triptych. If you've read these and want to add something, please drop it in the comments below. Until next time, I hope you find something great to read. Bye for now.